Good morning. This is the Blaine's World webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You get more information about our show and past shows, future shows, on my website, which is behind me, www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce one of the most positive guys I know, and he is author Neil Taft, who is my guest today. And Neil, you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this.
Hello.
And that is Neil, or also, can I also call you Grandpa Neil? Is that what you like to
Please
be
call
called?
me anything you want to. Yes. In
Okay,
81 years, I've been called a lot of things, Blaine.
but Grandpa Neil is okay?
Grandpa Neil is fine.
I love it. Neil Taft, aka Grandpa Neil, is a professional public speaker, a tireless youth advocate, and published author about grandparenting, plus 400 articles on the subject on his two websites. He is a retired youth minister who believes in cultivating meaningful and lasting connections with others, especially our youth. So, Neil, let me ask you this question, which I usually do to start. As a kid, you grew up where?
I grew up in South Florida, actually, and then moved to Cincinnati as a teenager.
Okay. And as a kid or a teenager, do you always know you wanted to be well, I guess first you were a minister at one time?
I was a youth minister at my church by default, a volunteer youth minister for about 3.5 years. Yes.
Okay. So aside from that, before you got into writing, did you do other stuff?
Oh, I've had 11 really wonderful careers in my life.
Well,
Yes.
by the way, as you're saying it, that's another book also, I gotta believe, you know.
That's well, it is at Toastmasters. I give them a list of all the things I've done. I've managed a NASCAR team. I was a licensed jet aircraft mechanic. I've been a licensed contractor. I've had a wonderful, wonderful life.
Okay, 11 different careers. That's quite something. So when did you get into writing?
I was my grown son and I found an interest on the internet, and we went to a seminar down in Atlanta about keywording, and that's how you get traction on the internet. And I went because it would spend time with my grown son. This has been about 15, 18 years ago. And so I agreed to go. And we came back home, and on the ride back home, we started talking about this. So we went, I said, do you want to get in it? He said, yeah. So we got in it, got in the e-commerce business, created a website, and he got the products together and did all this kind of stuff. And he said, Dad, just write little short articles. Well, it was recycling at the time. If you're 15, 18 years ago, everybody was doing recycling, and we were selling recycling bins, containers, et cetera, et cetera. So I did. Well, when you go on Google, there's a number in the upper left-hand corner. When the day I started, there was 1,538,000 and change people that are mentions already on there about recycle bins. So we started at that bottom of that. 4 months later, we were number one on Google.
Really?
And it was because we knew how to do keywords. Chuck's written a book about keywords, my son. And so it worked. So then after we did that, I called him up one day and I said, Chuck, I want to write a blog. This is a couple of years in.
Right.
And he said, come on up. Or no, I said, I want to have lunch with you, is what I said. So I went up to Asheville. We had lunch together. And he said, well, what's your big idea? And I said, I want to write a blog. And he reaches across the table and pats me on the arm and says, Dad, I love you, but you'll write a blog, 3 or 4 people will read it in a family, and even they too will wane. And I said, that's okay. I'm committed. I want to do it anyway. He said, choose a subject you're passionate about. I said, that's real easy. I am the best grandpa I know. He said, well, then let's go with it. So we started writing. and I wrote articles on my caringgrandparents.com is my website. There's over 450 articles on there I've written. And then as we were doing this, the way to get names is you write a little one pager and offer it for the email addresses. You build your email list. So I wrote a one page. He read it and he said, "That's pretty good. Why don't you write a pamphlet?" So I wrote 3 more pages and I had a pamphlet. And he said, "Dad, you're on a roll. Why don't you go for a book?" Well, that was my first of 4 books that I had called No Greater Loss. And that was back in 2011, I think, 2010, 11. And then after that, we kept going, but then life happened. And I wrote a second book, not great sales. It was just it was about grandparents' rights, not the world we find ourselves in today in grandparenting. So fast forward 14 years later, I sign up for a writing seminar with a title and a concept. And my title was Good to Great Grandparenting. And I had nothing written. The lady told me to write 20 pages. There were 20 pages. Well, lo and behold, after got down to the end of it, this gentleman named Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul guy, who said, "I like your writing." As a matter of fact, above my head is a picture of him holding this book, Good to Great Grandparenting. We're getting on a roll. Then I wrote Caring Grandparents.
By the way, let me stop you a second.
Um,
We're frozen a little bit, so let me just stop you for a
yeah,
second. And now I
okay.
think we're almost back, not frozen, but we could hear you, so that was good. But we're freezing a little. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going
Oh,
to put it on pause. And stay with me a second here. Hi again. Sorry about the break there, but I think we settled all our technical difficulties. And we had the pleasure of speaking with Neil Taft. And Neil's talking about his writing on the subject of grandparenting. And you're telling me a great story, Neil, about how I guess you got inspired by Jack Canfield.
yes, Jack Canfield. I've had some coaching from him and some other very good coaches, and but I've known Jack for 40 years. I started with him when I was a youth minister. I started his
Oh,
self-esteem seminars, so we have that connection. But he has said, um, one of the quotes I have in my book is, he said, "I think Neil knows more about grandparenting than anybody I've ever met."
well, that's
That's
some
pretty
call.
powerful coming from him. He's
Right.
got grandkids of his own, so I cherish that. But that's kind of how I got in the whole writing thing. And now I'm writing a fifth book, and I'm trying to build a bridge. There's a social change going on between adult children and grandparents. It's a silent crisis and it affects a tremendous amount of people. And it's somehow or another, there's good intentions on both sides, but it just gets so balled up in people wanting to be right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my newest book is a bridge. Um, what have I got? My working title. I've got it right here. A bridge to better family function. And I'm writing not only to grandparents on this, but I'm writing to daughter-in-laws, parents of the children. What the shift has been is that parents of the children feel disrespected, unseen, et cetera, like they're not important, and they are the most important thing in this. Scripture says you'll leave your family and cleave to your spouse.
And now talk about your writing. So when you write, you're writing on your fifth book there. Do you get up like every morning? You told me you get up at a ridiculous time in the morning. When the first thing in the morning, do you get up and write for a couple of hours? How do you do that?
I do. I get up, I'm practicing for a TEDx talk, so I practice that first. And then I go back to my last chapter I've written and I start at the beginning of that chapter and come up to it and then try to finish that chapter out. I'm about ten chapters in now. But by 5 o'clock in the morning, I've done a lot of writing
Do you write every day?
almost every day. Some days I do research as opposed to writing, but I write almost every day. Yeah,
And so when you write, I mean, that's quite some discipline. How long do you write?
my sitter downer doesn't work. I'm only good for about 30 minutes,
Oh,
and then
really?
I've got to get up and go do something.
Okay. Now, when you write too, do you write out stuff longhand or you use a word process? You use a computer?
I write on my computer. I can type enough to write on my computer.
Okay. Because that was a change in your life and my lifetime, that people used to write stuff longhand.
I used to write on yellow pads. I've got yellow pads from way back when, yes.
The first couple of books were in on yellow page on yellow
My
pads,
first book took me 8 years to write, and it was all longhand and loose leaf and all that. And I had a big old file of it when I finally got around to it. Then I had to put it in a word processor. So
so when you write, so how long this fifth book now, how long will this take you overall to write?
I'll probably write this one in about 3 months, maybe 4 months.
Okay. And so describe the process. So as you're writing it, is your publisher reading it or you wait till the end to send it to them?
No, I will finish it first and then get 20 first readers, people that are grandparents, et cetera, understand to read it and give me brutal feedback, if you will. Then I'll edit the first time myself, and then I'll take it off to the editor and we'll go from there.
And so from start to finish, I guess the whole thing will take about a year then by the time you finish writing it.
It's 6 or 8 months this time. I've some A lot of the stories that I told in the last two books will come over to this because I'm really creating a whole new audience
Right.
in-laws, daughter-in-laws, daughters, et cetera, that are in this situation. I Let me tell you a crazy story.
Oh,
Toastmasters is one of my favorite thing. I go every week. Was there this morning, and there's a lady in our Toastmasters has a small little podcast up here. She had 26 subscribers. It's women speaking to women about women things.
right.
Well, she was short a guest one day, and she said, "Would you be on?" And I said, "Yes." So I go on her show, and we did 27 minutes of show. She's just starting this out, so it doesn't have a tremendous following, but she asked me a question. She said, "What do you think the biggest mistake grandparents make in connecting with their grandkids?" I thought for a second. I said, "They fail to take real good care of the mother of their grandchildren. She's the queen that sits on the throne. She has the keys to the castle. You may not like hearing that, but that is fact." She took that minute and 11-second answer in her question, put it on TikTok and Instagram, 1.9 million views,
Wow.
2,000 comments that I have printed out here that I've read coming from mothers of children. And it all positive, like, please say more, say more. I wish my parents knew this, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them wanted me to be their father-in-law, but how that goes. Uh, but that indicated to me, Blaine,
Wow.
that there, number one, there's a big wound there. Number two, both people really want the best for the grandkids. Intention's just not enough in grandparenting anymore. You have to add a lot to it. You have this extended family of people you didn't choose.
Yeah.
Now, once they show up and they're in charge of the grandkids. So that was a shift in my thinking, and that's why I'm working on the bridge project.
Well, let me ask
Because
you, Neil, since you mentioned it, that clip you just mentioned, is there a YouTube clip of that also? Is it on YouTube?
yes, it is. It's on my YouTube channel, Neil Taft.
Okay, so I'll be able to find it because with your okay, in the description of today's program, I'd like to mention the clip. Is that okay?
Sure, by all means, I'll
Yeah.
get it for you and I'll make sure you got, I'll have my VA be sure you got the right, whatever it is, but
Okay,
it's a
because
minute and 11 seconds.
well, I can probably find it on your website. Is that
Yep.
correct?
It's
Because
on my website. It's on my YouTube channel also.
because that blows me away. I mean, that number of
That's,
viewers.
oh, I'm the most surprised guy. An 81-year-old man sitting in a wingback chair talking to a friend of his, and it just went crazy. But what it did was it struck a chord. And now I want to address both audiences because my goal, if asked to choose between parents, grandparents, and grandkids, parents and grandparents are out of luck because I go for grandkids. All this is good for grandkids, and what's good for the grandkids is good for family.
Sure. How do you
And
become
that's
how do you become Grandpa Neil? When did they start calling you that?
my first grandson's 37 years old. He was the
Right.
one that came up with Grandpa Neil. And now I have six grandchildren, seven great grandchildren, and two great great grandchildren. So
Okay.
Grandpa Neil sort of stuck.
But they all call you Grandpa Neil.
Yes.
Talk to me about Neil, and not only me, but other people watching this program. How does one become, aside from reading your books and blog entries, but what's the best way for somebody to become a good grandparent? Do you have a like one bit of advice?
There are no magic things. Every family is complex and life is kind of complicated. I have a saying, life is complicated. Family life is a multiple of complicated, and extended family life is exponentially complicated. But just because it's complicated doesn't mean we don't do anything with it. That's just kind of like saying, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
We have to communicate. We have to, consideration is the thing. It's not so much when a mother-in-law goes in to help when a new baby's born, she doesn't have to tell that mother that's tired and scared and everything else what to do. She needs to ask. And presents, same thing with presents. Grandparents tend to give kids presents and take all the thunder away from the parents. Maybe the parent wanted to buy them a bike. Ask, ask, ask. That's the one key thing is to do that and establish a relationship.
Well, I love what you said there, Neil, and I'll have to remember to send you information on the subject. But I'm a big believer in something called the platinum rule. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I've not.
Okay, platinum rule, and you might find this interesting, is kind of an alternative to the golden rule. And it's exactly what you said. Most people believe in the golden rule, right?
Right.
As whatever. I
Yep.
don't. I believe in the platinum rule. And the platinum rule, you said it word for word. What that does, is rather than give people what they want to give to somebody, much better, and you said it better than I'm saying it, much better ask what they want as opposed to you giving it to them. So I'll send you a clip I did on it, but you live by it, it seems like, that if the daughter-in-laws or whoever it's involved just ask, they'll be better off than rather than assuming what people want.
Do you know my son Chuck Taft
Right,
up
sure.
there? Well, Chuck, my grandkids are my granddaughter's 20 and we go down to 16 on the youngest one in that family. Every time I go there, I say, what are we working on? Because if there are no electronics, if they got it taken away, I'm not going to, cause that. If food's not a big issue, but still, if there, no sweets or whatever the case may be, and I always that helps me also to help the young people. But we're consistent on that. I always ask, what are we working on? So
Great question. Let
it
me ask you this back to the book and some of the stuff you do. So, what are the things that folks can do who are listening to this to create these meaningful connections? So, one thing you just said they can ask, ask questions. What are some of the other things they can do?
well, there's there's a lot of steps to getting there to meaningful connections. It depends on ages and stuff like that. But the first thing you must do is partner with the parents. If you don't have that going for you, they may tolerate you to having a quick visit, but you're not going to enjoy it. Um, the overnights don't happen, et cetera, and it gets less and less as time goes on, and all at once, grandparents aren't seeing their grandkids. I kind of tend to people, number one, lower your expectations. These are not perfect people, neither are you. So just, just don't try to encourage this kid. Well, you got a 98. Well, who got the other 2%? I mean, um, I connect with kids very small with sounds, give them distance. I squat down, etc. Then when they get older, but I had a famous move of mine is what I call the upside down hug. Now, when they get up 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to about 11 years old, I slowly grab them by the arm and draw them into me and begin to grin. And I'll turn them around, start to grab them, turn them upside down. I'll say, you know what Grandpa Neil loves about you? And they'll say, what? And I shake their lunch out of them and I say, everything.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
My now 37-year-old grandson, jokingly, he's 6'1", 240. He says, can I have my upside down hug, Grandpa Neil?
I was gonna say, yeah,
It's a connection.
yeah. So yeah, I don't think you give it to him anymore.
No, I told him he's out of luck. About 10 or 11, they get too big for me to do that.
Well, like what you also said, Neil, but I imagine people have a problem with it too, where you're telling about getting it down at their level. But my problem is now that I can't get up, you know.
Well, that's true too, but I have a big voice, so I have to be careful I don't scare little ones.
Yeah,
So I stop a distance away and I get down to eye level with them, and I can usually do that. With little children, you can always compliment their shoes or their t-shirt. With teenagers, compliment their nails.
I love it.
It works every time. With older kids, compliment their character, not what they're doing, not your straight A's, but I see the way you are with your friends, and I really admire that because you're really kind with them or whatever those things are. And the connection is something that's you really have to think about. It doesn't just automatically happen, and they go through phases. Um,
What,
my
what, what's very interesting about what you're saying is I'm trying to think about with my grandparents, which I didn't have a really close relationship with. How is a parent, you said the parent becomes a key person. Has the parent what can parent do to maintain that relationship with the grandparent? And to have the kid, for example, I can get my daughter to do this, to want to call the grandparents or to be in touch with the grandparents. What can be done about that?
it it again, for some years when they're small, they
Right.
can't wait to call grandma and grandpa,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. But the parents can participate. Long distance grandparenting, which is becoming more prevalent because of geography, or everybody moving all over the place. It requires like Zoom calls and stuff like this, FaceTime and all that kind of stuff. If the parents aren't involved in that, it very seldom works. You can't get a 4-year-old to sit still. So there's input from the parents on that. What what we know from research is that if the children have a grandparent, very significant grandparent in their life, they tend to behave better in school, at
Interesting.
home, and everything else. So it's incumbent upon those parents, but not all parents see it the same way. Parents don't even agree amongst themselves sometimes. But yeah, you have to, but by and large, it's if the more that cohesive family unit you can, um, I do it by affirmation. My my son Chuck, his first wife, they got a divorce. It's been 10, 12 years ago. And I've treated her with such respect that I sit next to her when my granddaughter's in a play. I have 100% access to her and everything else because that was a conscious decision. I wasn't
Right.
going to take sides. It was, I just sort of stood off to the side and I told my son that if you don't do that, then you have this animosity going on. So it's you have to be conscious. It's Jack Canfield asked me one time, he said, "What do you think the biggest myth about grandparenting is?" And I
And
said, "It's that grandparents think grandparenting's like falling off a log. It just comes natural. It does not.
but
There's especially with all the stuff going on today."
great point. What about this one thing a buddy of mine does? I'm so impressed with it. Is every Sunday night, like clockwork, he has a call at 7 o'clock with his granddaughter, and it's just, I'm so impressed with it. But I feel bad because it's with there are two grandchildren there. It's with one of the grandchildren, but only the one does it, the other doesn't. But I think it's just such a lovely idea, though. Like clockwork, he doesn't miss it. 7 o'clock Sunday, he'll make that call. And I guess almost like back to your writing, being regimented, you got to kind of work at it, I guess, to make sure it happens. But is that a good idea?
Oh, it's excellent idea. Consistency is one of the things that kids want to count on. They got to look forward to something. My three grandchildren, Chuck's kids, they call me every Sunday morning on their way to church. They have about a 20-minute drive, and
Lovely.
then they'll pass the phone around, and it's wonderful. It's magic. Now, two of them have gone off to college, so my grandson and I have a conversation, and we joke around. I'll say, "Do I have to talk to my son?" That kind of thing. So, but it consistency is one of those things. Kids want your presence. They want you to be zeroed in on them individually. You're talking about the two grandkids and the one connects.
Right,
That's because he or she is feeling seen.
right.
They're feeling heard. And one young man said just recently, he said, presence is priceless. And that's when you're with the kid, be 100%, no distraction, no anything. Don't answer your phone, don't do anything. Be with that kid, 100%. And that's a true presence.
When all the Tafts get together and talk about the presence idea, do you put the phones aside?
We sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends on where they are. Um, I in their house up there, I sit at the dining room table and they walk by and do all this stuff. And then one of them will sit down, we'll talk for a while, and then the other will sit down and we have some great conversations. I don't intrude into their lives, they're teenagers. I don't intrude into what they got going on, but they wind up because I'm sitting there reading my book and they eventually come to it. But it it depends and it changes with age. There's um, some of the I've been working on asking better questions that you don't ask a kid how's school. That's
Right,
the
right.
dumbest question on the world in the world.
By the way, I see another book for you in your spare time, but questions, questions for grandparents ask, or it would be such a powerful book or just an article leading to a book. But I think a lot of people would love to see it because, like, we hear what you're saying, but a lot of people don't know how to ask the questions.
That's it, and it's a skill. You can learn it. One of the most significant questions I asked my granddaughter was about 15. Her brother was 13, I think, at the time. And he was in the kitchen, but he could hear us talking at the table. And I asked her, I said, Kai, tell me, what kind of things are you afraid of? What does fear look like for you? And she went on with, well, the bullies at school and this, that, and the other thing. And I worry about mom and dad sometime because they work so hard to make enough money. And I worry that I don't get don't make the team or what. And we went on. This conversation wound up. Her brother came and sat down and wanted to one up her. So here we had two of them. Their mother walked through, stopped, sat down, and we had a 25-minute conversation on what kind of things scare you.
But even just listen to it, I'm so impressed because so far superior than the proverbial "what you do in school today."
Sure, sure. Yeah, this and that's one of those lazy things we do. But yeah, and some of them are hard. When my grandson was 8, 9, 10 years old, it's hard to talk to an 8 or 9, 10-year-old boy. I mean, they just one word answers. So, but you find ways to do it. Find out what they're interested in. That's the old Dale Carnegie principle. Find out what they're interested in, and I keep pretty well up with my grandkids as what they're doing and what they're interested in.
And when you speak of Toastmasters, are you always speaking about grandparenting or you speak other topics as well?
No, I all kinds of topics. I have a loose leaf book right behind me here that I take every week. I'll get an idea, enoughness. People don't feel like they're enough, and they feel intimidated and all this kind of stuff. I can make we do 5 to 7 minute speeches. I can do that. My TEDx talk is on family, enhancing family function. That's a 12-minute talk, and I can do anywhere in between. Then I do it on uh, connections, a lot of what I talk about. I do it on my careers. I did one last week. I'm a storyteller, so I told a story last week at another. You'll appreciate this. Had a lady that was leading the group lean down to me and say, "My speaker didn't show up. Can you do this?" 20 seconds I had to prepare for that one. And that was about a 7 minute deal. But I wind up, that story was about how to find goodness in people, even when it doesn't, it's real hard to find, but there's hope and brings it out of that. There's a story Jack Canfield told 40 years ago, never been written down. I remembered it. I emailed him and asked him if I could tell it, and he said, sure. So that was a story that I told last week.
The one you're going to do you're working on a TED Talk. Have you given that yet? Have you given the speech yet?
No, May 15th, it's a TEDx here in Wilmington. And if you, one out of every 500 get to go to the TED stage,
Right.
and that's real big. But that I did not know this, but if you the big TED stage, tickets cost $5,000 a piece, and you'll be over 2 years to get one.
Really? Wow.
They're,
And that's
they're sold out every time.
okay. Let me have you hold on a second. I think we're having technical difficulties again, so I want to take a quick pause. Let me see if I can get the pause. Hi again. Sorry for that second interruption, but just to remind everybody, we're speaking to Neil Taft, aka known as Grandpa Neil. And we're talking, as we wind down here, Neil, we're talking about a presentation you're going to be doing at a TEDx talk coming up. And when's that going to be?
Yes, we formed a TEDx organization here in Wilmington. There will be 15 of us speaking. Audience is limited to 100 people, and you there are last count there are 5 PhDs presenting. So it's a real resume booster, if you will. I'm not real worried about my resume, but it's a real resume booster. But we have 7 of us from my Toastmasters club are going to present, and then the people from the community come in. So it's really really a neat deal.
And if I can ask you for advice about one thing, since you mentioned a couple of times Toastmasters, um, give a recommendation, if you will, for anybody listening, both for themselves or their grandkids or anybody else. Good group to get involved in?
Toastmasters is I call it self-esteem training. It boosts your confidence. People say I don't do public speaking. Well, you
Right.
don't do private speaking either. You and I are not private speaking. I mean, we're talking to an audience. It it just gets all that stuff out of the way, and helps you with your little butterflies. I still get nervous when I get up every time, but and I've been in it 25 years. But yet you learn to get those butterflies all flying in the same direction, I guess. And
So strong recommendation. If they have a local Toastmasters, check it out.
there's a Toastmasters in almost every city in the country.
Have you ever
There,
gone with your grandkids?
no, my grandkids have not. Well, they're not here. I
Right.
mean, they're up there. Um, they do have some organizations for younger people that do that, but Toastmasters is primarily young professionals trying to get their, presentation skills.
And that's where you come in, of course, as a young professional, right?
Yes, yeah,
Uh,
I'm a young professional. I'm only 81. What the heck?
Exactly. Neil, if you, as we close, you mentioned you've written the books. Can you just kind of hold them up and then we'll talk about the current one?
Sure. Yeah. My last book is Caring Grandparents. And that's also, like I said, it's my brand. Caringgrandparents.com is the website that I've had now for 16 years or whatever. And that one. And then I wrote another one just before this, Good to Great Grandparenting. And that they differ in that this one I deal with what I call grand heroes. The last part of this book has to do with grandparents having to raise their grandchildren without any notice, which is a 2.5 million households and 8
Wow.
million kids. So it's a big number. But so I included that in this book. It was not in the other book, but
So,
I look forward to writing this next one where I put them together.
so folks want to track down Neil Taft. What's the best bet to track you down?
Um, I'm on neiltaft.com, caringgrandparents.com, and anything on YouTube is Neil Taft. That's my channel.
Okay. And you're also available, I guess, your books are available. Best bet is Amazon.
Yes, Neil Taft and Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of those, go in, put my name in, and they're there.
By now. And I assume too, if anybody's interested in finding out more about you or also inviting you to speak to their group, you'd be interested in doing that?
Absolutely. I've been I've been speaking for years. Yes, love
Okay,
it.
well, I can see why, Neil. This was quite some show, and I want to thank you for being my guest on this edition of Blaine's World webcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and my hope is that one time I'll get to, I think we met in passing once, but one time I'll get to, even better, not to meet you, I'd love to hear you speak, or,
Well, I appreciate that.
yeah, or that's why they invented, I guess, YouTube. We can listen. Now, can we find you on YouTube, some of your presentations?
Yeah, Neil Taft. It's everything. The podcasts I do are on there. That excerpt of that viral moment is on there. I have I have a real old speech in Toastmasters I gave about truth, and that was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Not bad.
Okay, and now we'll add to this. You've now been the pinnacle of your career has been now you've been on Blaine's World, Neil. So where can you go
That's
from there?
I have arrived.
Now, Taff, I'd like to thank you for being my guest, and like I said, hopefully we'll bump into each other not in a not too far distant future, man. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Blaine.